I wish we were to start off with some Christmas music because that would be pretty good in theme. Because we are doing a special episode of the In the Tank podcast here. As always, I am Donald Kendal, and it might be a surprise to some of you out there listening, but we like to talk about other things other than public policy every once in a while. Sometimes during the podcast, in the opening chit chat or in the closing minutes, we'll talk about movies or what's streaming or what's kind of caught our attention in the last couple of weeks or anything like that. But it's Christmas. Or at least Christmas is in a couple of days, so why not spend the entire time talking about those things? I think that sounds like a good idea. Joining me, I've got Jim Lakely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you, good sir?
Doing well. Almost done with all of my Christmas shopping. I have a couple more things to pick up, but like everyone else, it's a bit of a different and a quieter Christmas. So you know what? I'm probably going to be watching a lot of streaming stuff and lots of entertainment. So that's why we're doing this podcast today.
Christmas is in like a couple of days, right? You don't have your shopping done?
I mean, literally one thing to pick up. Just move on.
All right. And joining us, our special guest here, Christian Toto. He is a movie critic and editor at hollywoodintoto.com. How are you, good sir?
I'm great. How you doing?
I am doing fantastic. And I know that we've just met for the first time, and you have the unfortunate pleasure of knowing Jim for a long time. You got a history with this guy?
We got a history, What am I saying? Yeah, we worked in the salt mines together at the Washington Times back in the day.
Okay.
And regrettably, we've stayed in touch.
Yeah, I held the clipboard in the salt mines. Christian did all the work.
Yeah, so I want to talk about a number of things. I mean, just kind of like kind of the year in review. What movies and shows should we catch up on if you have some time off during these holidays? But I also want to get into some of the more political angles. The whole go woke, go broke concept that's in Hollywood that seems to be, every studio is just racing to prove that correctly. But then also I want to get into just like what is the future of movies and like these studios going forward after I don't think any industry was probably hit worse from COVID than like these movie studios. I'm probably missing something important, but I think it's in the top three probably. Sure. So again, welcome to the podcast. But Jim, where do you want to start off with this? Where do you want to go with this podcast?
Well, first, I want to encourage all of our listeners to visit hollywoodintoto.com and also sign up for their email updates, which are extensive and fantastic. The team that Christian has over there at his website are great. If you want to consume pop culture in a more intelligent way, Hollywood in Toto is a great website to check out and a great email to get into your inbox regularly, because Christian Toto, he's been a movie critic and a pop culture critic for decades now. And again, he and I have a history going back to the Washington Times many years ago. But, pop culture and movie criticism is a very liberal field. It's probably more liberal than even political reporting, if you can believe it, if it's possible, but it's true. So Christian comes at it from the perspective. A lot of the stuff you're going to read there comes at it from a perspective of a normal person, right? Not a Pauline Kael who lives in Manhattan, or all the hipsters in San Francisco and LA and Brooklyn who are doing most of the pop culture writing these days. If you're a normal person and want to know what a normal person thinks about, say, Wonder Woman 1984, which we'll get into, Christian is apparently not a fan, but he takes the broad view. He looks at all of these things, and so he's a cultural critic. He's he's as well as a pop culture critic. So that's why I love reading. I love reading it. And in fact, I'm watching right now. There's a new show. It's actually not new, but it was new to me. One of your writers, Christian, he had his top shows of 2020, and number one with a bullet. And he said there's nothing even close to second place, was a show called Babylon Berlin, which is a show. It's German, as you might imagine. It's a German show, so you listen to it in German and read the subtitles. I'm finding it awesome. My wife and I are enjoying that show. So, a lot of great recommendations on what to watch at hollywoodintoto.com.
Well, I'm curious. So how long have you been doing this? How long have you been kind of maintaining this site? How long have you been reviewing movies like this?
So I've been reviewing movies for a while. I guess maybe mid-90s. I was in Pittsburgh for a couple of years, and I just started there, kind of dipped my toe in it. When I went to DC, it got more fully involved, and that's around 2000 or so, give or take. And then I started my website about 2014, toward the end of the year, and that's my home base. And I appear on the Daily Wire, I'm in Newsbusters. I'm in different places, a little bit on thehill.com as well. But I really wanted a home to kind of really just cover stuff the way I wanted to cover stuff, to not be beholden to certain, people saying you should cover this more than that. And I, Jim nicely called me the normal reviewer. And, I am right of center, but at the same time, if something is left of center and good, I want to give it a good grade. I don't want to just take points off because it's, anti-Trump or whatever. So I really do try to kind of walk that line with being, hey, I'm right of center, I'm open about it, but I want to be as fair as possible. And as we go into the Wonder Woman, the sequel, there's a lot of woke stuff in there. There's a lot of anti-Trump stuff in there. And I mentioned that in my review. That's kind of part of what I do. But I don't want to say that's why the movie was bad. The movie's bad for different reasons. So I kind of have a bone to pick with a lot of my liberal critic friends, because I think they're really letting their politics just overwhelm their reviews, where if it's even remotely right of center, it's like, I can't recommend this to you because it's that. Well, no. Is it good? Is it captivating? Is it interesting? And I think when you get in the critic game, you lose that sense of, hey, by the way, you're doing this as a service to the readers, and you're not doing a service to the readers if you're letting your personal biases just flood the zone and overwhelm what should be a helpful review.
I think that is like it makes a whole lot of sense to review movies like that, but I bet that alone keeps you from getting invited to premieres and stuff like that.
I have suffered a few slings and arrows for being right of center, but generally speaking, I'm treated well. And I think part of that is, listen, I'm right of center, but I'm not slinging mud. I'm not calling people nasty names. I'm trying to be as diplomatic as possible. I'll interview people on the left, on the right. Like I said, I'll give a good review to a movie on the left if it's solid. So I think by being as professional as I can while maintaining my own sort of significant differences with the industry, I think I've been able to kind of thread that needle as of right now.
So in your experience doing this, have you noticed like a lurch towards putting, social justice warrior type stuff in movies, or are we just kind of as viewers just noticing it more? What do you think?
Well, it's happening more, and the critics are mentioning it more, and the critics are including it in their reviews. You'll read reviews, they'll say there's not enough people of color in this movie, and that's a demerit. You'll see reviews saying the person, doesn't kind of convey certain qualities that we want in a certain demographic. That's a demerit. A couple of years ago, Amy Schumer did a movie. Amy Schumer is a very progressive comedian, and the critics savaged it because the movie showed people of color. They were in a different country as the bad guys. Well, if you're in a different country and there are bad guys in the film, the chances are they may be people of color because that's who's there. So it gets that absurd. Jim Gaffigan, about a year or so ago, made a movie, and it was about a father and son, and it's sort of their relationship and the complications where they're in. And even he complained. He said, I read some reviews of my movie, and I don't want to, yell at them for not liking it or liking it. But some of them said, why is this focused on a man and his son? Like, because that's the story. Why is that bad? You can make a story about a mom and her daughter. That's perfectly fine. But this particular movie was about a straight white male and his son, and that's okay. You don't take points off for that, okay? You can maybe step back and say maybe Hollywood is focusing too much on straight white males. That's certainly an argument. You can go back and forth on that. But to say a movie comes along and then you critique it in that fashion, it's not right. It really is not right. And it's really not fair to the people who spent a lot of time making these movies. I mean, it takes me 2 hours to watch a movie. It takes me an hour or two to write a film. And in a way, that's not fair to all the people that put all the blood, sweat, and tears into it. But that's the gig. It's the way it goes. And I try to be as fair as possible. But if you really kind of just denigrate a movie because it didn't fit into your specific ideological blueprint, I don't think that's right.
Yeah, I'm always kind of skeptical of just like the overarching narratives. We hear people right of center talking about all this SJW stuff is being injected into movies, and I'm that's why I kind of asked you that question, because I'm kind of skeptical because I'll watch like these movies in the 80s, and I don't know if there was some cultural references or political messaging in these movies. I was too young during that time to kind of understand that stuff. But like flash forward to today, and I was watching the newest Jurassic World movie, and the villain calls the girl a nasty woman. And it was just like, well, clearly that's a Trump thing. Like,
Right.
clearly they're trying to make Trumpisms like a villainous thing, and I couldn't help but notice that. So,
well,
like,
it's Donald. It's worse than that, because that particular line, what did it do? It took you out of the movie
completely.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
even if you wanted to have that character say something venomous, that's fine. But when you use that particular phrase, when everyone knows what it really means, you're taking out of the experience. And I really hate that. Listen, if it was some sort of conservative talking point, it would have the same kind of stop the presses kind of event. Like, no, don't bring that up. You're evoking something that kind of puts your mind elsewhere. It's a dinosaur movie. Let's run with it. No, you can actually put messages in any kind of movie. I mean, Night of the Living Dead is a classic example, kind of talking about racism. Dawn of the Dead talked about consumerism, but it did it in a very sophisticated fashion, even though it was a zombie movie. And I'm all on board with that. I think it makes art richer. Even if I don't agree with the message, it makes you think. It makes you leave the theater and say, oh, wait a minute. Oh, I get what they were going with there. That's interesting. But if it's in your face and just very, very kind of blatant, it's not good storytelling. It really isn't. And more and more Hollywood screenwriters are just being open to this kind of situation. And I think it doesn't do the art well.
So any theories onto the explanation of this? Like, has Hollywood just kind of gotten more of just like the PR arm of, some larger thing going on? And what's the explanation for this?
I mean, I think liberals today, with the Trump example, are obsessed with him. So anytime they can mention him, denigrate him, attack him, game on, they want to do it. I also think that artists today are very aware that what they're creating can have an impact. And if they're creating art and they want to make the world a different place, then they're going to have art that reflects a different world. They're going to have art that makes you say, well, I wasn't sure about how I felt about trans issues, but I just saw this movie and it made me feel differently about it. Now, I'm not even getting into the trans issue completely. I'm just saying that's the way they envision art now. The last year or so, I've seen so many projects that are pro-open borders, anti-wall, pro-immigration, unfettered immigration. It's not an accident. And you don't see the other side. And you could say as an artist, I believe in open borders, but I'm going to make a story that maybe kind of has the conflict on both sides. So you can kind of think for yourself and say, wow, here's a very sympathetic immigrant character. He came to the country illegally. And maybe there are negative, consequences to that. Maybe there's positive consequences. Maybe there are different shades of the argument. But often what you'll see is one side, and then you'll see the ICE agents marching in as like Darth Vader, like stormtroopers. And well, duh, what do you think you're supposed to take away from this? But again, it makes bad storytelling. It really does. And you think of a movie, why do we love The Sopranos? Because Tony Soprano is a monster and a villain and a killer who loves his family, who helps his friends, and who's loyal to a fault. How fascinating is that character?
Right.
So all those different shades, you add them together, it makes for Tony Soprano. But when you're watching a movie where all the ICE agents are monsters and all the illegal immigrants are saintly and wonderful, it's not that interesting. It's propaganda, really.
Right, yeah. Right. What's interesting about that, Christian, is that it seems like these social justice warriors that run the studios and that are the creatives in Hollywood, they prefer to use a sledgehammer when a tap on the shoulder would do, and it's actually kind of an insult to the audience. Like, I don't think I'm really not confident that the people are going to get the idea that I want more illegal immigration, or cracking down on immigration is a bad thing. So I'm going to hit them in the face repeatedly with a sledgehammer until they get it. I mean, it's an insult to the audience that they can't figure it out. That, again, like you mentioned George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. I mean, it's hard to call a zombie movie subtle, but it was a commentary on racism in America that wasn't necessarily hitting you in the face every 30 seconds with the message. You got it. That movie had respect for the audience to pick up on it and go with it. And so we now have this go woke and maybe go broke. I don't know. We'll see. But Hollywood's gone woke and they're going broke. But they go woke because they hit you in the face with sledgehammers all day. They don't. Maybe if the goal is to raise the awareness and maybe shine some enlightenment on the audience in your point of view, you can do that creatively. But that's hard. Instead, you go woke and you just throw it in people's faces all the time. And you as a conservative who is criticizing movies and and pop culture and all of that, you mentioned here near the opening that even though you come at things from a right-leaning perspective, if you were to reject everything from Hollywood that is woke or that is that goes against the way you look at the world, you'd find something else to write about. There would be anything you could consume. But here we are. So let's get into the wokeness and whether or not that's going to translate into brokenness for Hollywood.
Well, I mean, it has to a certain degree. We've seen some franchises that have really stumbled. The Terminator. No, I think Terminator was dead on arrival after Dark Fate came out. I think it was last year. The previous film wasn't successful. I don't think people care about Schwarzenegger anymore, which makes me sad because he was sort of like action guy when I was growing up. But when you watch the movie, it's all these different female characters, and some of them are not very interesting. They're often flawless. That's another problem with the SJW mindset, is that the Mary Sues come in, the sort of these perfect female characters that are tough and cool and beautiful, and that's not interesting as well. I mean, sometimes you want to see Indiana Jones get socked in the jaw, and you want him to be imperfect, or you want him to make a mistake. Sometimes our best, most interesting characters make mistakes. Han Solo was kind of a rogue and a rebel, but you loved him because he was so interesting. So I think that comes into play. I think that Hollywood is scared to death of woke culture, scared to death of being called out for it. And I think they're trying to kind of push out product that protects them to a certain degree. So I think there's many, many reasons why they're doing it. I also don't think they get the message yet that the whole woke stuff is not working out for them. The new Charlie's Angels from a year or two ago was just woke on steroids. The first line of the movie was Kristen Stewart saying, "I believe women can do anything." Like right away, I'm out of the movie. I mean, that's a speech. That's not conversation. I'm sorry, it's not. And then, they took the sexiness partly out of the movie. It felt a little bit like a lecture. It wasn't as sort of rock and roll fun like the old Charlie's Angels used to be. The old Charlie's Angels had 3 beautiful women who were smart and dedicated and talented, and they saved the day. Isn't that enough? That was kind of cool, especially for the late 70s. So why can't that be enough? It's the in your face. And I think there's a sense that, the straight white males, we don't like the powerful women. People have been in love with Princess Leia for 30 years, 40 years.
Right. Sarah Connor.
Ellen Ripley, Sarah Connor. All these characters are great. Was it Katniss from the Hunger Games?
Yes.
Sure. No one raised a stink about these characters. They're good characters. They're powerful. They're compelling. There's great actresses behind them. It's like when the Ghostbusters came out, the Lady Ghostbusters, which, I could talk about for 8 hours. But when that first trailer dropped and it stunk on steroids, you're like, well, you hate it because, it's women. And no, it wasn't funny. If that first trailer dropped and those 4 women were killing it with the comedy,
right,
the whole narrative would have changed. Like, I can't wait to see that movie.
Bridesmaids is one of the funniest movies of the last, 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
Right. I was aware that Ghostbusters was going to be all female cast, and I was like, okay, look at the new trailer dropped. Let's check it out.
Yeah.
And at the end of the trailer, I was just like, oh, I went into that knowing that they're going to do an all female version. So
it's not just unfunny. It's aggressively unfunny. It seems to take pleasure in not being funny. It's like so awful.
And it's disingenuous because the director, Paul, I think his name is Paul Feig.
Yeah.
He said, I didn't pick women on purpose. I just went for the funniest people possible. Really? Leslie Jones is like the 4th funniest person in the world. Sorry. She's kind of funny, but she's not top 4. Please.
Right. You could still get Bill Murray. He was still available. It almost seems like there's a couple of instances where it seems like they were trying to use the controversy of going SJW as a shield for their movie.
It was a shield and a talking point, and they actually leaned into it. It was the whole chapter of the Ghostbusters movie was very interesting because they did that. Matter of fact, Sony, I think one of the heads at Sony cursed out critics of the film who hadn't seen it yet, were maybe skeptical of the process. I think they went on Ellen with Hillary Clinton. They leaned hard into it. And I think there was even a scene in the movie, like a short scene of them huddled around a laptop, kind of poking fun at the Jews.
Yeah.
So they leaned into it and they paid the price. And by the way, it made around $100 million, which is not bad, but the marketing was so big and the special effects and the budget was so big, they actually lost millions of dollars.
Oh, yeah.
Another lesson kind of buried within it. But yeah, that's the way it goes. And I may jump ahead of sort of the conversation here, but 2017's Wonder Woman wasn't woke at all. It was Gal Gadot, a great performance, funny, charming. It was like kind of the female version of Christopher Reeve from Superman back in the day. It was that engaging, that kind of, I'm a star, watch me roll.
Right.
I just watched the new one, and there's woke stuff all in it. There's bad storytelling. There's anti-Trump stuff, but it's not a good movie. The difference is, I think I wrote this in my review, to say that they're night and day between these two films doesn't quantify how different these two movies are as far as quality. Well, and they went woke. And I think it hurts I think on a certain level, and I sort of ramble, I think it hurts their story. I think it really dings their creativity. That if they're thinking I need to be progressive, I need to have all these talking points, I need to be anti-Trump, I think their storytelling chops somehow suffer as a result.
Well, there's a couple of things I can go off of that. One is just like who are they trying to convince here? It's just like the people that are most annoyed by this, let's say Jim and I, with this like this messaging that's just like, well, you hate women, so get ready for this. It's like, no, we don't. Like who are these people that they're trying to convert over with this like powerful like woman in your face SJW stuff? Like the first Wonder Woman when it came out. Mm-hmm. Jim, you really liked that movie.
Oh, I loved it. Loved it.
I was like, oh yeah, it's pretty good, whatever. But like, there was no like hatred because it was a woman character or anything like that. So it's just like
about that rollout. That movie came out, and it was after Ghostbusters, and no one behind the scenes or in the marketing or even the actresses involved, no one played the gender card.
Right.
They said, here's our movie. Hope you enjoy it.
Yeah. Right.
And I think they had a good movie on their hands. I think that's why they were able to kind of do that.
Yeah, and I want you to compare it a little bit more to Wonder Woman 84, or is it Wonder Woman 1984, whatever. But and again, what Donnie just said, I go to the movies to eat popcorn, not to eat my peas, right? I'm not there to eat vegetables and to take my medicine. I'm there to eat popcorn and enjoy myself. And if I'm being lectured, if I feel like I'm being lectured, that's not enjoyable. Nobody enjoys that. I don't know why anybody wants to make a movie like that. And again, when you put, in my opinion, and I want you to expand on this, Christian, when you put in obvious, Hillary references or anti-Trump references, that so dates the movie. That would be as if Star Wars like had some kind of hidden commentary on the oil embargo or or Jimmy Carter. You know how that would just not only to take you out of the story in the moment, it eliminates the opportunity for a movie to be timeless entertainment. You can watch Wonder Woman right now, and it's still a great story. There's nothing in there that is contemporary that will take you out of the story, and that's great because now you can keep watching that movie over and over. If you put these contemporary political comments in there, you ruin it. You will not want to go back and see it. Not just even if you agree with it, because it'll just be such a sour note. Trump, who cares about Trump? That was 15 years ago, you might think. That doesn't make any sense to me now. Yet here they do. They do it anyway. In fact, they must do it, Christian, because they think it's more important to say that than to actually tell a good story.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts. One, you mentioned who do they appease with all these sort of obvious points? They appease the critics. Go look at what the reviews are for Wonder Woman 1984, which is a legitimately bad movie. And I listen, I know art is subjective. It's a bad movie. It's a dumb movie. And the reviews are a few people get it, but there's a lot of raves like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is exciting. As good as the first film, nonsense. But when you put those virtue signaling moments in there, you get the critics on your side. The critics today are more left of center, more activist, and more unwilling to accept things outside of their worldview than ever before. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years. It's obvious. Another example is the new Borat movie. I loved Borat. Loved it. One of my probably top 5 comedies of all time. Great movie. The new film starts well and then is a disaster. I sat there stone-faced through it. You know why it's getting rave reviews and it's getting Oscar buzz? Because it's all about anti-Trump, anti-Republicans, anti-Giuliani. It's all you need to get great reviews. But, at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to win many fans over. I mean, I don't think people will be talking about Borat's subsequent movie film in 5 years, but they're going to be talking about Borat forever because it's so good and so funny.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point, Jim. When you were talking about it, it kind of made me think of just like the pulp fiction type of quality that like old like comic books had originally, when they were just there to like get advertisements to kids, like that was the original concept for those things.
Yeah, get your sea monkeys, on the back cover.
Right. X-ray glasses or anything like that. Like that's all that it was made for. It was just like garbage in pictures to kind of get kids to look at these advertisements. And when you were talking about that and just like the lack of the timeless quality of these things, where we could talk about like Terminator 2 forever, right? For eternity. But then like these movies that are so based in kind of the culture and what's going on, the political theater of what's going on right now, it's just in the future, it's garbage. So I wonder if they're just kind of like treating this in the same way as just they're trying to sell ads to kids back in the day with these comic books. That's like now these movies, it's just garbage to try to get their message to the general public.
Well, I don't think they're thinking that far in advance. I think it's what virtue signaling is it feels good. It doesn't really do anything. It feels good. So in the moment, it feels right and justified. So that's, I think, what they're going for. The new Terminator movie had a whole illegal immigration subplot to it. Again, maybe the border gets straightened down in 5 to 10 years. I certainly hope so. But is that going to really matter in 5 to 10, 20 years? Probably not. It's not going to be as relevant, I would think. Maybe it will be, but it certainly risks that kind of losing that cachet. But that's what they do. And compare it to, it's the Christmas season, Elf. Elf is magical. I watch it every year. It seems to get better every year. And part of it is that director Jon Favreau, Mr. Mandalorian himself, he made the film with that in mind. He wanted it to be timeless. He wanted it to be something you could watch in 10, 20, 30 years. So if you watch the movie, the music is sort of either older or it's newer, but it has an old-timey feel to it. The humor is all slapstick, which dates beautifully. It isn't about modern references. They're not talking about the early 2000s when it was shot. So there's nothing in there that kind of dates it. It's just an elf meets a girl. It's a guy meets his son he never knew he existed. It's all things you could watch in 20, 30 years that are going to resonate. Listen, technology will change and things and life marches on. But he really specifically aimed to make that timeless. And I don't think today's filmmakers or storytellers care that much about that. They'd rather have the endorphin hit of where, if I'm getting my chemicals right, of having that little moment in their movies. They'd rather have that, and they don't care about the future.
Well, I mean, and to that point, like the original Star Wars trilogy, like that is like the most timeless, playing with archetypes that'll never be outdated. Though those movies will go on forever. But then you flash forward to the sequel trilogy, and you've got Admiral Gender Studies, like telling Poe that he's a bad person because he cares, or whatever. Like those movies are already forgotten, essentially.
Yeah.
But then
go.
Right. Oh man, yes, I know. But then you brought up Jon Favreau, and you look at the Mandalorian series that's going on right now, and it seems to be completely devoid of this, SJW, current politics, stuff like that. And I could totally see this Mandalorian series being one of these more timeless things that people enjoy for decades in the future. No,
is Jon Favreau the least appreciated artist in Hollywood? I mean, think about the Iron Man series, MCU. He did great with The Jungle Book, which was a live action kind of quasi, mostly CGI. He did Elf, Mandalorian. He's done little films like Chef. Guy's genius. And of course, Swingers was great. I think he may have written or co-written that, but obviously he was co-star. But just a huge talent who gets it. And by the way, I mean, maybe they want to keep him Mandalorian thing for a while, but why haven't they handed him a Star Wars movie? I think that would be a natural thing.
Well, go ahead, Jim.
Actually, I think that's a great idea, obviously. And yeah, Jon Favreau might be the most underappreciated creator in Hollywood, maybe ever. I mean, the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe exists because he took a C-list comic book character and a passion project, hired the right actor who nobody wanted to hire in Robert Downey Jr., and then $10 billion later, you have the greatest movie franchise of all time. What is it, 23 movies? I mean, it's insane. So. It's insane.
If he did just that, he's a legend.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So actually, we can get into this because I wanted to talk a little bit about streaming, and we want to talk about, I like going to the movie theater because I love movie popcorn. You can't replicate that, whatever they put what they call butter on those popcorn. You can't replicate that at home. And I just, I go there half for the popcorn and half for the movie. But, the movie industry is basically done now. People are streaming TV shows now. And again, I think, Jon Favreau may be able to save the Star Wars property, because the sequel trilogy basically killed Star Wars and any excitement for it. There are warehouses, somewhere filled with maybe they're being melted down now into a huge plastic ball, but there's tons of figurines and merchandise that has not been used. The entire business plan for the Star Wars trilogy, blew up because the movies were garbage. Now, so now we have Jon Favreau, who said,
7 was good for the record.
All right, whatever.
I agree.
You agree with 7? Okay, I'll have to rewatch it. I keep falling asleep in the middle of that one. I just can't get into it. But so Jon Favreau, they don't give him a movie. They give him The Mandalorian, which a lot of people got excited about. And, it's always a crapshoot. You never know how it's going to turn out. But, Jon Favreau obviously has a great track record. And I think just like he invented the Marvel Cinematic Universe, he's probably going to be the person who saves Star Wars as a viable property. But I think the future is probably not another trilogy of films or even another single one-off film. Those are expensive. The theaters are not open anymore, so you can make it back in the first weekend or two. And, a television show for streaming is a lot more affordable. It's a lot easier to consume in a pandemic culture that we have now. And so I wonder, Christian, if you think the future of entertainment is more on streaming and series, limited series like The Mandalorian, only 8 episodes per season, or and has the age of the big blockbuster, the $1 billion movie. Have we seen our last $1 billion movie that is released in the theaters?
Well, if you asked me this around June or July, I'd say, well, no, I think we'll come back to the theater. I think there's a reason why we went to the theater in the first place, like you mentioned, the communal experience, the love of it's sort of part of our culture. I'm not convinced anymore. I think there's multiple factors why I think theaters are in significant trouble. And I think they'll always exist to a certain degree, but not like they are now. We've spent 9-10 months getting completely used to getting fresh, new, top tier content, either for free or a micro, just a tiny cost at home. I just went to Costco 2 hours ago. There's a 75-inch TV for $1,000. 75 inches in your home for $1,000. I'm a journalist. I don't make a lot of money, but that's within my grasp at some point very soon. And I think the actors who you think would be rallying to save the theatrical experience, they're done. George Clooney's new movie, Netflix. David Fincher, Netflix. Martin Scorsese, Netflix. They've all basically given up on the theatrical model for various reasons. Scorsese made The Irishman, and the price tag was too much for the theater model, so they went to, Netflix just wrote a big check. Well, why couldn't he have maybe wrote it in a different way to kind of get it into the theater? He just wanted to have his movie the way he wanted it. So I think it's fascinating that a lot of the artists today seem to be a-okay with losing the theatrical model. They don't seem to be rallying around it. I think that's fascinating. But I just think that as a consumer, our culture, our behavior changes very quickly. Once upon a time, I needed to have a newspaper in my hand, even though I had a phone in my hand. I wanted to have that paper. I don't give a darn about the newspaper anymore. I don't care about it. I would just push it away if I saw it. And I think in a similar way, I think our behaviors change more quickly now. I think technology makes it possible. Why would I go to a theater where the movie could stink? I'm going to overpay. I'm going to have some yokel behind me talking. Maybe the popcorn is stale that day. And all these things that could go awry. I need to get a babysitter if I'm married. All these terrible things. Or I could just stay at home, be comfortable, be in my slippers, watch a movie on my big screen TV with my sound bar, and have a heck of a time. And if I don't have a heck of a time, what I lace, $2? I mean, at some point, why would you bother?
Yeah, I'm
that
very
sounds cynical.
curious.
Yeah, I guess it is.
No, hey, I agree with you. Before all of the pandemic stuff, I especially in my last 6 movie going experiences, half of them were nightmares where I literally had to confront people to stop talking so I can enjoy the movie. So yeah, I'm generally one of those guys that would rather watch it at home. In fact, I've said before that if this movie was available to me right now for $5 and I could stream it at home, or $10, I could stream it at home, I'd do it, so but I'm not going to go to the theater to watch it. But I would guess, and this is just a wild estimation, but just the they say Like there's certain movies you have to go see in theaters. And I think that's kind of panned out. And my wild guess is that like over the last couple of years, like 70% of the movie revenues have been generated by like 3 different franchises, whether it's Marvel, DC, and Star Wars. It's like those were like the movies that you have to go see in theaters. And those are also movies that have budgets of like $250 million. So I'm just curious, even if we do open up all the theaters right now, like, are people going to flock back to them? Are they going to sit, 6 inches away from the other person next to them as opposed to 6 feet? Like, I just wonder if the era of a $250 million movie is over.
It's possible. I mean, I think as far as going back to theaters, we're not going to throw a switch and say, okay, everyone feels comfortable sitting this close to their seat partner. So there's going to be sort of a 6-month period where we're kind of getting reacclimated to being in public, being social, being next to each other. So there's that impediment as well. So even if people were, couldn't wait to get back in theaters, I think there's going to be that hesitation, which is going to continue us to stay home and keep having us consuming original, fresh content in theaters. And I think the one thing I don't understand is the sort of the numbers behind the scenes. I just don't, I'm not a good financial analyst. And like you mentioned, The Mandalorian, I just raced through the last few episodes. That must have cost a fortune. I mean, it looks like a big budget movie. And when they recreated a specific character who I will not spoil, they did it digitally.
Yeah, Jar Jar Binks. I'll spoil it for you.
Jar Jar, that's right. Couldn't wait for him to come back. That must have cost a fortune. So, I mean, here's an 8-episode series. Each episode's roughly an hour. How much did that cost? And did they recoup their costs with subscriptions? And I really don't have a handle on sort of the numbers behind that. But like you're saying, if you put out a movie right now, I mean, Wonder Woman's going to come out this weekend. How much is that going to make?
Yeah.
I mean, how many theaters are open?
Right.
And you're going to rush out when you could just like, okay, I'll buy 1 month subscription to HBO Max and I'll watch it at home. I think it's going to be disastrous. And there's so many factors involved that are working against movies. But what you mentioned, Donald, is sort of maybe this is the course correction to get the theatrical model right, to do like the Alamo Drafthouse, no texting, no talking, to serve food there, actually decent food. Mm-hmm. Maybe make it more of an upscale experience that you can't get at home. At the end of the day, if you go see a horror movie in a theater, it's always better.
Sure.
Because you've got everyone around you who's similarly scared or laughing or shrieking or whatever. And you can't duplicate that at home. It's the one real advantage that the theatrical model has, is that communal experience. But is it enough to kind of overwhelm the guy behind you, the high prices, the inconvenience? There's so many other factors working against it.
Yeah, cultural habits are very easy to leave behind. Very easy to leave behind. And so, yeah, I've been to a few of those upscale theaters. They have fewer seats. The seats are bigger. The food is better. But I don't think you can sustain the billion-dollar blockbuster Hollywood model anymore on those kind of theaters and that kind of experience. I think I really do believe that we may have seen our last billion-dollar movie, and it ironically might be, I guess, would have been the last Star Wars movie. The Rise of Skywalker might be the last movie to make $1 billion.
Are you, both of you, kind of curious about Hollywood's indifference to this whole sea change? Like, why aren't actors talking about it? I thought for a while that a bunch of actors would get together. The celebrity PSAs they do for election time, which are awful. But what if they got together like Denzel and Meryl Streep and said, listen, we all love going to the movies. I remember when I was 14 years old, I had my first kiss at a movie. Wouldn't it be interesting if they kind of rallied their star power for the theatrical experience and do it for free and just say, hey, when things are safer, let's go back to the movies. And not political, make it tap into our nostalgia circuits. They didn't even do that. And I think Christopher Nolan is blasting HBO Max for having the new Warner Brothers titles on small screen, and I get it. Good for him. I don't forgive him for Tenet, but good for him. But why are more people doing that? Like, why isn't that like a common refrain? It's like, I think him, the new director of Dune, whose name I can never pronounce. It's like those two guys. Like, where's everyone else? Don't they want the theatrical model to survive? Why aren't they talking about it? They talk about everything.
So I have 2 thoughts on that. And Jim, we haven't talked about this, so I don't know, maybe you share this or completely opposed. But One, I think that just like the lockdown stuff became so political so fast, where it's just like anyone that says anything other than, stay at home and put a mask on is like evil, and tantamount
Killing grandma.
killing grandma, right? Leading to genocide. So that, and then also during the lockdown, there was a number of people that were coming out and being like, we're all in this together, as they sit in their giant mansion, poolside, while I'm stuck in my like apartment, with one room. So I think that's part of it. Like I think people expected this to be like a couple of months, just be a little bump in the road for the studios and all of that stuff. And it ended up being, approaching a year at this point. That's my best guess. What do you think, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it. I mean, I just know for myself, I'm exhausted. I mean, after COVID this year, and then this election, and people losing their minds, and cities on fire, and you can't say the wrong thing, or a social media mob will come after you and try to destroy your life. I mean, I am just exhausted. I'm mentally exhausted. So frankly, if a movie theater was open and I was really jonesing to see a movie, I might actually just want to stay at home. I mean, I've had it up to here basically with the world, and I need some escapism. And I mean, I want to get back out there. But, I don't want to be the experience. As I said earlier, I think it's very easy to break, and maybe permanently break, cultural habits. We used to go to, live theaters, right? And, we actually used to do a lot more things outside than we do today. A lot more kids are playing video games, and now we're all streaming things. And, often especially now with lockdown, a lot of weekends are spent with a lot of people, streaming a new show that they learned about on hollywoodandtoto.com, their best lists. And so, I don't think these cultural habits that we have now are going to be easy to switch off. I think, people did think this was going to be temporary. They thought they never would have dreamed in March that Thanksgiving was basically canceled, that Christmas would be canceled, except if you're a powerful politician. Then everything can actually work out just fine. Everything is just normal if you're the right person. And so I think we have a cultural exhaustion right now. Yeah. And why I would love to see, as you mentioned, Christian, these big Hollywood stars, do some free PSAs basically, and you could put them as commercials, which I see more of now in streaming services, to say, look, I know you're enjoying sitting on your couch and making your own popcorn, but get back out there in the theaters, because frankly, there's a lot of jobs on the line. I didn't mean to bring this up, but the one big high profile film being filmed right now is the 7th Mission Impossible movie. And Tom Cruise went on an epic rant and he said, as he is wont to say, because he has a very inflated view of himself, we are employing thousands of people in Hollywood. Thousands of people's jobs are on the line. You put that mask on, and all of that. And so I don't know. I don't think Hollywood actually has the humility to recognize what's happening in the how the streaming wars and how the streaming services are going to end Hollywood as they've always known it. Yeah. Am I wrong, Christian, or am I kind of on the right track?
No, I think you make a lot of good points. And also there's a lack of awareness of the bigger picture, no pun intended. And also, these, I mentioned my pie in the sky thought was, as a guy who likes the movies, wouldn't it be nice if the stars rallied toward the movie cause? But I think half the country hates celebrities. I think half the country hates Hollywood. Right. They've spent the last year just destroying their goodwill and credibility in ways that I can't fathom. I got into this gig because I like movies, and I veered to the right because I was right of center, and it felt like there was a niche to be filled. But I still kind of loved Hollywood, and I loved the actors, even though I didn't know them. But like, they're actors, they're celebrities. They make me happy. They entertain me. I look at them now and I'm disgusted by them. I'm just revolted by their behavior. George Takei from Star Trek, saying he hopes Marco Rubio gets, an adverse reaction to the COVID vaccine. It's a horrible thing to say. And by the way, a tangent we shouldn't go into because it's too much. He should be canceled for that. He won't be, of course, because he's picking on the correct party. But God forbid Roseanne Barr has one ugly, awful tweet. She's done. She's done. They took her show away.
I know.
Millions from her for one tweet. It was an ugly, gross, nasty tweet. I get that. But she apologized, and she's had a body of work that goes for 3 decades. I mean, she really revolutionized sitcom. She empowered women with the work she did. Gone. But
Oh,
George Takei can go on his computer and say, "I hope this politician dies," and nothing happens to him.
Right. I mean,
he's a good guy to Hollywood. He's our buddy.
I would love to spend, another hour just talking about Roseanne and just, that idea of just like a Chicago suburb, heartland of America type family. But that's a totally different podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the future is. I think that like the whole streaming wars concept was something that was talked about before COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this just kind of increases the speed of that kind of taking over. You mentioned the idea of Jon Favreau, like why isn't he getting a Star Wars movie? His success in Mandalorian has spawned like another, like the Disney investors meeting that they had a couple of weeks ago. They announced like 7 different shows, and like 3 of them are like specifically underneath his wing. So he's doing fine. Like he's got enough stuff under his but like that to me just shows for Disney that getting a $10 a month subscriber is more important than having a one-time getting into the movie theater to watch Black Widow. I think that's the business model, and it kind of makes sense to me.
And I wonder if they're going to learn the lessons of the Mandalorian, or they're going to go back to the SJW stuff, because they don't have the self-awareness. They didn't realize that the Last Jedi went woke, and that was one of many, many problems with it. They don't realize that. They don't get that.
Right.
When during the Bush years with the Iraq War, Hollywood cranked out like every other film was anti-war, anti-Bush, anti-war, anti-US soldier. And they had to have like 10 flops before they said, maybe we should stop doing this, because they're all losing us millions of dollars. And I think it's the same thing here. I think the woke stuff, you're going to have flop after flop after flop, which we've already had, but I guess we'll need more. Until people realize maybe that's not a good way to kind of tell stories. But Hollywood doesn't get that. And if you read the Hollywood Reporter or Variety, they don't get it either. They would never blame the woke kind of mindset on any of these flops. They just won't. They don't acknowledge it. They don't think that's an issue.
Yeah, Thor 4 and the gender gap is going to be a real hit, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I guess, Christian, the beatings from the audience will continue until the product improves.
That's right.
From Hollywood. I guess we haven't gotten to that point yet. But, as we're talking about kind of the things that we lament about modern Hollywood, I want to talk a little bit about some good things. You consume a lot of pop culture, and let's talk about some of the things that you would recommend to our listeners and viewers here on YouTube to, when they have a little bit of time and they're not allowed to go outside, they might want to stream on their favorite streaming service. But I want to talk a little bit first about the Mandalorian, because Donald and I are big fans of the show. As I mentioned earlier, I think the Mandalorian and Jon Favreau have basically saved the Star Wars franchise as a viable property going forward. And we just had the second season finale last week. So why don't you talk a little bit about why you think, if you agree with us, that the Mandalorian is maybe the best Star Wars product of all of, since basically the sequel trilogy began
of my lifetime.
Yes, of Donald's lifetime. Yes, the best Star Wars stuff was in my lifetime, back in late 70s, early 80s. But talk a little bit about the Mandalorian and its place in the Star Wars lore.
Well, I think the story so far has been fairly simple, and there are lots of detours. But here's this sort of lone mythic figure, and he's there to protect a baby Yoda. And I think while the story kind of takes twists and turns, it's a very basic concept. So it's not complicated. It's not it's not twisting upon itself in sort of obvious ways or maybe kind of confusing ways. So I think it speaks to a very basic narrative. Little to no woke stuff in there for sure. I think they very ingeniously woven it into the Star Wars fabric. And, for a while I thought, what is a Star Wars movie? Like, what does that mean? If you don't have Skywalker, what does it mean? So what The Mandalorian did is that it looks like a Star Wars movie. I think almost more importantly, it sounds like a Star Wars movie. Every blaster, every door opening on a spaceship.
Soundtracks.
The soundtrack. It evokes that feel. And it's almost hard to kind of quantify. I'm kind of struggling to even describe it, but it just feels like a Star Wars project. And that's fascinating to me that they were able to do that. The action sequences are spectacular. I mean, they're interesting. They're as good as anything you see in the movies. They're complex visually, but not distractingly so. I think Pedro Pascal, just his line readings are very interesting. And you know, no face, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think the way he moves his body is very purposeful. There's like, he's really acting. And I think,
Right.
When you have other senses shut down, you have to kind of compensate. I think there's something about watching him on screen, which is not just a dude in a suit when I see his face. There's something there.
It's actually an amazing performance when you think about it, that he can evoke so much emotion in you as you're watching him, either excitement or sadness.
Yeah, or a tin can over his head.
With a garbage pail over his head. You know, it's pretty amazing. It's a great performance by him. And it's a reflection of his voice during his dub over, because obviously that's not his voice coming out of the helmet.
Yeah, there's a quality to his voice, which is really interesting. So, you know, I think there's a lot of fan service there, which I normally kind of find annoying when the product is bad, but I kind of love it when the product is good. Like when the new movies of Star Wars, like, oh, there's this guy, there's Lando, he's back. Like, he's not really there for a reason. He's there because you're going to kind of get a nostalgia burst from it.
Right.
I love Billy D. Williams. I love Lando, the character, but he didn't really add anything to it. He's just there, just popped in.
Yeah, when the fan service is at the expense of the quality of the thing, like look
at all the Easter eggs in, you know, The Rise of Skywalker. I don't care.
Right.
I don't think I'll ever watch that movie again. It broke my heart so savagely. I don't want to go through that experience. The same with I've seen The Last Jedi and the Rise of Skywalker once. I'm done. I'm out. Yeah. I saw it. I get it. It's terrible.
The best example of this is in Rogue One, where they're walking through a street and the movie literally comes to a stop and they look over and there's two characters from the original, like the bar scene in the original. And then the movie continues. It was like that was at the expense of it. But yeah, Mandalorian, last comment on this. Yeah. I feel like everyone's probably already watching this, so we don't really have to spend a whole lot of time on recommending this, but it's just, again, going to those archetypes that are like present in the original. And it's just like, this is the most bare bones at the core of it. It's the most bare bones story of essentially like a dad and his son. Yeah. And I will say, without spoiling anything in the last episode, that when I was watching that last episode, I was holding my 3-month-old and I think that made it hit me emotionally just that much more, but that's all I'll say. But so beyond Mandalorian, which if you're not watching it, you should, people. What other things are out there that are maybe streaming on something that we should keep an eye out for?
You know, this is some of my references here are going to be a little bit dated because I watch so many movies that I don't see as many TV shows, but I just caught up with Cobra Kai season 1, which is an ingenious way to keep the story of the Karate Kid going. So I know everyone has said good things about it. It really is impressive and it's smart. And when it does the fan service, it's all part of the story. It doesn't come out of the blue. It's really brilliant.
William Zabek is actually a pretty good actor.
He is a good actor. And making him not quite the villain and making Ralph Macchio not quite the hero is brilliant.
Oh, yes.
But listen, the bad guy is still kind of a jerk. He's still he's still kind of blunt. I mean, they haven't like changed his DNA. He's still that guy, but he's interesting.
And you see the story from his perspective, and he gives his perspective the whole story, and they show the flashbacks from the movie of Ralph Macchio sucker punched him and stole his girlfriend, and you're like, oh my God, I had this all wrong. He's right. Ralph Macchio is a jerk.
So much of our culture now is like, oh, there's going to be a new Exorcist movie. There's a new Terminator. Like, we can't let go of these properties. But when it's like the Bates Motel, which was a really good show, or it's like Hannibal, which was a great NBC series, or it's this, I'm okay with it. If you're going to really make it something really substantial, I'm fine. I just caught up with Ray Donovan. Amazon Prime right now, I think to maybe January 11th, is having the first season of Ray Donovan. So you can just kind of go with that. Oh, it's brilliant. It's a little bit Sopranos-esque because it's so these characters are so warped. But Jon Voight is unbelievably great in the show. Now, I don't know where he goes in subsequent seasons, but it's one of the best TV show performances I've ever seen. It is off the chart. So even if you love Jon Voight, you watch it for that. I, a couple of years ago, finished Sons of Anarchy. It's brutal, but it's a great show. Justified is amazing writing. That's Timothy Oliphant and the great Walton Goggins, who's never had a role a fraction as good as playing Boyd Crowder in that show. And I love this a show called Broadchurch. It's from Britain. It's on Netflix. It's a murder mystery. Only 3 seasons, but the 2 lead actors, it's one of the Doctor Who characters who I can't recall, and Olivia Colman. when that show ended, I missed those characters. That's how much I love them. And again, not perfect, they were flawed, but they just had great chemistry. They were so interesting, and that's a great show, Broadchurch. So just a couple of suggestions.
Okay. I do have a couple rapid fire questions for you. And this might discredit you in the eyes of some fans, depending on your answers. So we'll see. Wow. This is a threatening way to kind of end this podcast. But favorite, and I'll ask you this and Jim, and I'll give my answer to all of these.
Okay.
Your favorite movie, not necessarily the best movie, but your favorite movie.
That's a good qualifier. Raising Arizona.
Raising Arizona. Okay, that's Nicolas Cage, right?
Holly Hunter.
Okay, Jim.
It's hard to say what's your favorite movie, but I'll tell you the movie that I always start watching, no matter where I find it. Dumb and Dumber. Never fails to make me laugh, no matter what.
Okay, Terminator 2 is my favorite. I think I've probably said that a number of times on this podcast. Best movie going experience.
I saw About a Boy with my future bride, and I don't know whether I was falling in love with her or the movie or both, but it was kind of a magic moment for me.
Okay. Jim?
Best movie going experience was when I was 6 years old, and I went to see, or 6 or 7 years old, I went to see Star Wars with my brother in New York City. Waiting outside to get into the theater and seeing that for the first time in the theater was, well, it's something I still remember, 45 years later.
Okay. This one might be a little embarrassing for me, but I'm going to say it anyways. Star Wars Episode 1, similar story to yours. I went and saw it with my brother at like midnight on like a school day, and I was 10 years old when that came out, and that movie was made for a 10-year-old, so it completely resonated with me, and I absolutely loved it when I was 10 years old.
And then when you turned 11, like, wait a minute, that was not good.
Yeah, it was more like when I turned 14. But okay, the Christmas season's coming up. Favorite Christmas movie?
Elf, no doubt. Okay. I grew up on A Christmas Story. It's a great one. I get it, but I watch Elf every year. It gets richer. I love it. It's a very aggressively funny movie, and for some reason I laugh every year. I kind of know it's coming, but I still enjoy it. And Will Ferrell, I don't agree with him politically. A brilliant performance. I mean, to me, he evokes like the great slapstick comedians of all time. It's wonderful performance, and not cynical, and not kind of meta, and not wink wink, and not like, oh, look how dumb I am. I think I'm an elf. It's just sweet and pure, and it's just magic.
Yeah, I really like that answer, Jim.
Yeah, it's Elf. My wife and I quote that movie all year long, all the time. You know, we know the four food groups, which is candy corn, sugar, and syrup. I think. You know?
He did sugar.
That's right. That's right. And no, I mean it's that's shocking. We say that a lot, and all sorts of things. Elf is definitely the greatest Christmas movie of all time. Second place would be Die Hard.
Oh, nice. I will go against the grain here, and I'm going to say Christmas Vacation, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
It's good stuff.
We watch that on Christmas every year, along with Die Hard. So that's right up there. That's my favorite Christmas movie. I probably should have put that one last, but I got one more question for you. Best sports movie of all time?
Oof.
A good stumper for the end of the podcast.
Yeah, I think Major League is a really good sports comedy. I don't know if it's the best. I think Bull Durham is pretty darn good, but a little overrated. I loved 8 Men Out, but it's been a while since I've seen it. I mean, you can say Rocky.
Okay, I'll take Rocky. Jen?
I think Rocky's safe.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many great sports movies. First thing that came to my mind though was Hoosiers. Fantastic performance by Gene Hackman and Barbara Hershey. It's a quiet film. It's inspiring. It is the Rocky of basketball movies. That's another one that I will always just look what I came across. Hoosiers, great. I'll just sit down here and watch. I guess I'm not doing anything for the next 90 minutes. I have to finish watching that. So Hoosiers are probably my favorite sports movie.
By the way, I'm like that with Starship Troopers. If I enter movie, I can't leave. I can't. You could actually, you could try to drag me away, but I can't.
I love Starship Troopers, sir. Just for that reference, I'm going to visit your website every day from now on. Hopefully, this is not sacrilege, but a boxing movie that I like more than Rocky is Cinderella Man. I think that is
that's great.
fantastic movie. I can't get enough of that. But I feel vindicated in my answer that I was going to give for this last question when you mentioned Major League. Major League is my favorite sports movie of all time. So that should be a pretty good way to end it. Jim, unless you want to throw in any other last little bits of info here.
No, I would just say that you must visit hollywoodandtoto.com. You must sign up for his email so that you get those every week so you can review all the great stories he has over there. And I do hope that Christian will be a regular guest here on this podcast. This was a hell of a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Christian Toto, editor, hollywoodandtoto.com. Thank you for being on with us, sir.
My pleasure. Thanks so much, guys.